So I will. So for this class, you can find yourself in a super comfortable position. We're just going to start seated. I do have a yoga mat prepared behind me, but you do not need one. You can lay on the floor for parts of it. And for those who do not know me and have not worked with me, my name is Gabby. I'm very grateful to have you here. My cat Timmy and my dog Mala may be wandering in and out as we go. They love when I sit on the floor. They're like, oh, you're here to play with me. So I teach yoga for every equestrian. That is, I have my book, Yoga for Every Equestrian, available on all the platforms. I have classes online. I teach rider biomechanics, body alignment, and meditation mindfulness for riders. So this is what I absolutely love to do. I'll give a little bit of my background and try not to bore my prior students with it. But I grew up a very timid rider. But all I ever wanted to do was ride horses. I knew that from day one. But it did not come easily or naturally to me. Like I saw it come so easily to other people, or what it looked like come so easily to others. So it took a lot of education, a lot of finding the right trainers, finding positive influences, finding people that really believe in the education, believe in the horses, believe in, just the whole, all of it, not just, it's a sport, or not just it's this, but just the whole person, the whole horse, all of it together, right? There are a lot of emotions when it comes to riding. We've got the horse's emotions, we've got our emotions, we've got the trainer's emotions on that day, we've got whoever is around us, right? So it is a very dynamic, I don't even really like to use the word sport all the time, but passion, hobby, sport, however you look at it. And we're also very lucky and very fortunate, but it's also, it can bring out a lot for us. So I do like to tap into the mindfulness. Today will be primarily how the breath affects us when we ride, our energy, and also our position. So I'm really big on our biomechanics and even the most minute details. I love when I'll give us things at the end that you can try on your own horse and really see how it makes a difference in the way that they move. Which can be very, very cool when you really get to fine tune it. So we will start with a bit of a body awareness meditation. So if you are not used to meditating, don't worry about it. All you have to do is listen to my voice. There will be no test. This is just a practice. There is no doing this perfectly, which I feel like the horse world attracts a lot of perfectionists. So try to leave your expectations at the door and just give yourself a nice, curious, open mind and treat yourself with the same compassion you would your horse. So we're going to take a moment here. And I just want you to close the eyes if that feels comfortable. And if at any point, I should have said this before I had us close our eyes, if at any point my audio is a little off, I usually use my AirPods. They went beautifully missing right before this, but if at any point the audio is a little off, just send me a chat. And with that being said, allowing all of the noises in the room around you, all of the noises in the room around me, which I can't promise that my dog and my cat won't make a couple noises. Just allow that to become a part of the experience. Mindfulness is about full acceptance of what is. It's not about pushing anything away, but instead embracing all of what is. So it's not pretending that your horse will never spook. It's not pretending that everything's going to be perfect all of the time, but it's allowing ourselves to be present. To be capable of sitting through it. So as we sit here, I just want you to notice the air on your face. Notice the inner temperature without judgment. Are you cold, hot, neutral, indifferent, comfortable? And taking this moment now to just allow yourself to get 10% more comfortable, whatever that looks like for you. Now gently bringing our awareness to the breath. Where is it going in the body? Is it in the nose, the mouth, the throat, the chest, the diaphragm? And again, not judging any part of this, just simply noticing. Noticing the speed of the breath without judgment, with open curiosity. And as we scan through the body, I simply just invite your awareness to follow with the words. If you get lost or your mind wanders, just simply allow the mind to come back to wherever we are. Beginning at the crown of the head, the forehead, the center of the eyebrows, slightly inside the center of the eyebrows, the eyebrows, the eyes and the eyelids, the cheeks, the temples, the nose, the upper lip, the lower lip, the entire mouth, softening the entire face, the entire back of the head. Softening through the neck, the throat, the shoulders, the chest, slowing yourself down. A lot of times when we bring our awareness into our chest, we want to speed up. Feeling into the ribs and the lungs. The diaphragm. The entire belly. The arms. And the entire back. The whole spine, vertebrae by vertebrae. The hips. And just noticing without judgment if any parts of the body are more difficult to send awareness to. The thighs, the knees, the shins and the calves, all the way through the bottom of the feet. Feeling into the whole body, the whole body, the entire body. Now I invite you to pick one place in the body where you tend to hold your tension. Maybe you haven't ever thought about it before, maybe you have. I'll give you some common places where riders tend to hold tension. Maybe it's the jaw, the mouth. Sometimes if you see a horse show picture, just a picture, you feel your jaw clenching. The shoulders, the hips, if you hold yours elsewhere, that is perfectly okay. Wherever it may be, just pick one spot. And I invite you to visualize yourself sending your breath to this place. Just energetically sending your breath to soften without expectations, without judgment. And now very gently, I invite you to think of a little bit of a frustration in your ride. Maybe it's something you've been working on. Maybe it's something you've had trouble with for a long time. And I want you to see it as the observer, whatever it may be, without judgment, with full compassion. And send the breath into this situation. As if the breath is this bright light that expands and contracts as it inhales and exhales. And it just sends light and peace into this situation. And now I invite you to envision your perfect ride. The most fun, the most joyous. Maybe it's happened already. Maybe it's something you just see happening. Something that makes your heart smile. Maybe it's just a moment with a horse. It doesn't even have to be riding. And just breathing light and love and joy into this moment. Freeing yourself from expectations. Now holding on to this feeling of joy, I invite you to set an intention for your quote unquote practice today, but also for your next ride. Maybe it's inviting in more joy, having more fun, being silly, being present, slowing down, more focused, whatever it may be for you. We all have different intentions. Intentions help us a lot, especially with living animals, because if we go into something with a goal, of course, things can change. But if we go in with an intention, for instance, every lesson I go into, my intention is to help this horse and this rider in this moment. That does not depend on anything being any one way. So just holding this intention, placing it in your heart. And very gently, whenever you're ready, blinking open the eyes. Taking a deep inhale and a deep exhale, bringing yourself back to this space, back to this present moment. And sometimes it feels good just to kind of rub your thighs, just waking yourself up a little bit. So of course we don't have 20 minutes. Well, sometimes we do. We don't always have 20 minutes to warm up when we start to ride, so I will give us some little activities towards the end that we can do with our horse, just as a little bit of an experiment, some breathing exercises that take about 2 minutes, but you will really notice a difference. So we are going to go into the nitty gritty part of it and where we hold our energy, where we hold our breath, and how that affects our position. So if you are at a place where you can, I invite you to sit down on your heels. If you are seated on a chair, that is perfectly fine. You can stay on a chair. The reason, though, that I do like to sit on the heels is because a lot of imbalance starts in our hips. We tend to compensate one way to the other. So a lot of times, if you notice that you are quote unquote leaning, it tends to be an imbalance in the hip and not necessarily the shoulder. So I like to just go over this little body alignment piece before we get into the breath. It just really helps. So if you take your hands behind you and just kind of notice which hip goes further back on your feet. Mine miraculously right now are even, which is something that never happens to me. I have a bad hip, but I just went to the chiropractor. But typically what will happen is one hip is slightly further back towards the feet. Now, this may not be the hip that you expected, because a lot of times it's our strong hip that stays still, and our weaker hips tends to slide back to compensate and make room for it. So it may not be the side that maybe your leads are difficult or vice versa, or however it may be. But to correct, what we do is we just tuck the hip that's sitting slightly further back underneath us a little bit. And so I like to use the horse as an example, usually when I teach this in lessons. So we tuck if it's our left hip that we need to tuck, we tuck it up and under as if we're pointing it towards the horse's right ear. Now, we don't have a horse to demonstrate this on right now, but what tends to happen is they actually are able to bend more to the left when we do that. If one hip stays further back than the other, we actually impede on their motion and it's harder for them to bend. So we're not going to get too much into the body alignment. I just wanted to throw that out there because that always just is a huge help for me. Now, what that also helps us do is free up our diaphragm. What I see a lot of times with riders is either we have people that breathe in their chest and they overarch through the back, right? This is a really, really, really common one, especially in women, especially if we come from certain disciplines growing up. I'm not going to throw any disciplines under the bus, but so tend to think about sitting tall and we start to breathe through our chest and arch, which sometimes we do need a little bit. Hi, honey, please don't stand right there. Sometimes we do need a little bit of an arch in our backs, just because as females, I'm just going to assume everybody on our call is a female. As females, that is the natural curvature of our spine, and we want to be careful not to over round. So here's the other way that I see it. Sometimes we'll over round and their shoulders will come up and towards them, and then they start to breathe almost actually too low. And you'll see these be the people that kind of maybe a horse lacks energy. So what we want to do is come and sit in a very straight position, tuck the pelvic floor ever so slightly, and just try to find a slight straightness to the back. Now, the reason that the breath really changes the position and vice versa is because when we're in an aligned position, our diaphragm is free to breathe. So our breath should come from our diaphragm right by the rib cage. It shouldn't be up in the chest, which I don't want this to stress anybody out. If you've been breathing in your chest for X amount of years, this is a hard habit to break and something that we need to work on even outside of the saddle. But it's just something to kind of bring our awareness to. So I'm going to invite us to just place one hand on the upper abdomen. And if you've never thought about the breath before, and this is like, oh my God, this is so overwhelming, just take it literally one breath at a time. Try not to overwhelm yourself. But I just want you to think about, on an inhale, I want you to push out into your hand. And on an exhale, it should contract. So the hand should come down. I'm just playing around with that for just a moment. And when we allow the breath to go back down into its natural position, when our shoulders are directly above our hips, and if we're riding, our hips are directly above our heels, what happens is our shoulders are then allowed to relax. A lot of times we get stuck breathing through our chest and our neck. And a lot of times, if you ever gotten a massage or you do yoga or whatever it may be, or you like feel like your neck is always tight, it's not from lack of stretching. It's because the breath is getting stuck in the throat and those muscles are constantly contracted. So inevitably they're going to get tight. So as we allow that breath to slowly come down into the diaphragm, what happens is our shoulders are allowed to relax, our neck is allowed to soften, and we'll start to notice that things like our mouth soften and oxygen can flow more freely. And another thing that happens here, and I want us to go ahead and take, so if you know that you naturally overarch, I want you to go ahead and take that position now. Or if you have the opposite, if you tend to slouch, I want you to go ahead and take that position now as well. So whatever it may be for you, I tend to overarch. I have a very hyper flexible back, so I have to be very, very careful. And when I arch, what's really important to notice, or the opposite, sometimes I have people that sit way too far back. Either way, I want you to notice if you can send your breath down into the belly. If it's difficult, or maybe even if you notice like kind of a frustration, an emotion that comes up. And the next thing I want you to notice is how it cuts your body's connection in half. So when we are not connected like this, it cuts our hips off. So our hips are unable to move, but they're also unable to relax because they have to brace for us. So it's just something to notice. And now we're just going to go ahead and come back to neutral. So straightening the spine out, sometimes it helps to envision a wall behind you, and you want to think about pushing your belly button into the spine and pushing the spine slightly into the wall, but without over curling. And then taking the shoulders and lifting them ever so slightly, and then pulling them back down the back. So you want to feel like you're connecting your lowest rib to the hips. And you'll notice, we're going to take it a step further. Again, take this as you will, take what you need, leave the rest. If there are bits and pieces, you're like, all right, I just got used to breathing in and inviting air in, then just slow it down. But just something interesting to note is the breath can be so fine-tuned that we can engage our core just through an exhale. So when we are sitting properly aligned, I see you, Mala. When we are sitting properly aligned, on an exhale, we can actually contract the abdomen muscles and bring the lowest rib towards the hips and get an ab workout. So we're going to take our elbows by our sides, just like we're riding. We're going to take our hands facing each other like we're holding a ball. And we're going to exhale. And on every exhale, we are going to feel like we are pulling our pelvic floor up and into the diaphragm. And on the inhale, we're going to relax ever so slightly. And on an exhale, we are going to engage. So we're just going to do that for 10, and I'm going to shut up so you can focus. And if you start to lose the connection, just notice where your posture is. Are you starting to round too far forward? Are you starting to sit too far back? So what this does And you can relax that for a second and kind of find yourself back into a comfortable position. We're going to go ahead and lie down in just a moment on our bellies to really work on bringing that breath back down. But I'm just going to talk for a moment about what bringing the breath around does. So if you ever notice a rider that is, my dog really just wants you guys to see her butt. If you ever notice a rider that is extremely plugged in with a very engaged core, you also will notice that horses, well, they mimic everything. They mirror everything we do, right, with our bodies. But there's another step to it. When our breath is disconnected and our breath goes up to our chest, we disconnect from the horse. We take away this biggest line of communication, which is our pelvic floor and our hips. So they feel that lack of connection. And if you're working with a horse that tends to be a bit more sensitive, which one of my students that will be watching this, you know who you are, you know that the second you lose that connection and your breath comes up into your chest, she loses it too. Her head goes up, her spine hollows, and she gets very nervous, kind of looking for, like, where did that connection go? Where did my rider go? And the second we bring that energy all the way back down into the core and our hips are able to plug back in. So when I say that, it's not just a position thing. It's also, and this is going to sound super frou-frou woo-woo, but it's a real thing. But we also energetically plug back in with our hips. So we're physically plugged back in, but we're also a little bit more there. Our line of communication is a little bit stronger. So that's why the breath, when we walk around, what I encourage my students to do with the breath in the beginning is, especially if you were on a safe horse. So safety is everything to me. Please don't try these things if you don't feel safe, if you don't have a trainer present, all the things that you know where you are in your riding, you know your horse. But as if you can, warm up without your stirrups for a moment and try to send the breath into each hip as you walk around. Of course, you're not going to breathe through your hips. Your hips aren't going to be actually breathing, but it will slowly start to plug you in deeper. And you'll start to notice your horse will start to reach further down and they will start to show signs of release. So releasing for the horse, right, is licking, chewing, sneezing, shaking its poll out a little bit, because this really helps soften their spine. And I've had riders in the past try this and then go, they can really feel that, like that slight change, because you'll notice it right away. The horses really can. And if they really can, because of course, you notice if you fix the tiniest thing in your position, or if you fix an imbalance, the horse instantly comes round, right? Everybody's had that moment, that light bulb moment where a trainer just said something, or it was themselves, or however it happened. And all of a sudden the horse completely transforms the way that it's moving. So they really can feel that slight intention being sent down into those hips. So that is why it is really, really cool to experiment with the breath, because it will help fix your posture. You'll start to notice as you get even further into this breath work. And we can try it again, actually, as I say this. So I want us all to take a moment here and just feel like you're pushing something. Well, I am actually about to push something away from me, my dog. I want you to feel like you are pushing something away from you in your core. You may notice, so if you can be seated, you don't have to sit on your heels, you can be seated in any way, but I want you to feel like you're pushing something away. So what I want you to notice as you do this is if you feel one side of your core engage more than the other. We all have one stronger side. My right side engages right away. My left side takes a moment to fire. So we're going to take it even a step further in a second. I told you guys I really nerd out about this stuff. So as we're pushing something away, what happens here, right? So I already said my left hip shifts back. So if I tuck my left hip up and under, now both sides of my abdomen are activating. So we all might have one side that's just a little bit harder to activate. That's also a mind-body connection. When I'm going to the left, it takes me a microsecond longer to kind of register things or to ask for things with the horse. Just because my right side is a lot stronger, it's dominant. So if we have kind of that knowledge and that self-awareness, we can be aware of those things going in. So whenever I start to go to the left, I always make sure I'm tucked up and under with my left hip. So I'll give some visuals because I'm not in person with everybody. I can't show you exactly what I mean. You want to think about scooping with ice cream tucking that left hip like you're scooping ice cream up to the right ear. And then you might be able to feel, if it's your right hip, then do the exact same thing. It's always tuck the hip to the opposite ear, whichever weak hip. And then you'll notice that side of the core engage. And that's also going to help A, stabilize yourself, B, stabilize your horse, but also kind of find where those imbalances start. And then that's when the breath can even get more activated and help engage that core on an even deeper level. A lot of times I feel like we're expected to, and we can kind of relax and shake that out if you would like to. It's a lot of, it's crazy. The breath work can be the most engaging for the core. And it is a lot to take in. So I will send notes with this, and this video is being recorded and everything will be sent. But it feels like we are expected to know how to engage the core the second we sit on a horse. But we've never, I mean, of course, in different workout classes or whatever it may be, but I'll just speak for myself personally. It took me years to figure out where the hell my core was. I was like, I am trying to engage my core. Like I think I'm doing it. I might be doing it. And it wasn't until I really, really dove into breath work where I was like, oh my gosh, I can actually activate the lower abdomen, the upper abdomen separately and together. So we will play around with that as well with a little bit of breath work. And then we're going to go into some more relaxing breath and some breath that you can do with your horse before you get on, just to kind of play around and see how receptive they are to the breath. I have been teaching these clinics for a long time now, and it still amazes me, even like the most slow to react horses, I'll call them, will be licking, chewing, taking really big exhales all at the same time that the rider starts to soften and relax, and we start to go into the breath work. I have never had a case where a horse did not respond to the breath work. Even the craziest cases of, horses that were just extremely nervous off site or whatever it may be. So it is really, really cool to play around with. And if I was told this before I did these clinics, I don't know if I would have believed the extreme impact that our breath has on the horses. They really tune into it, right? We already know that they tune into our energy. That's been a pretty wide concept. But the way that they notice breath is just another part that keeps them alive in the herd, right? They notice if a horse stops breathing, because that means that horse is alert. So they notice when we stop breathing, or if our breath goes up into our chest. And we'll take this even another step further, which is really cool and something to notice. But I've noticed that horses that rear are just like us if we tend to be a chest breather. So I'll have a lot of horses get stuck, not stuck, I don't ride them now, but if I see horses that have a rearing tendency, what I notice is the breath gets stuck here and they have nowhere else to go but up. And then so it's really it's interesting to see the personality types that go with the breathing. And you can actually see horses have a diaphragm just like we do. They have rib cages, and we can help them breathe by putting their bodies in a correct position. So I have a horse right now with a student that roars. And from helping him with her breath and correcting her body, his roaring has improved dramatically. So just like how we get tight and tense in our necks, right? They do too. We've all seen, I won't go down that road, but they hold the breath in places of the body just like we do. So it is really cool to play around with. Another thing to help as we ride that I'll get into before we lie down on our mats, or on the floor, wherever you are. Another thing that really helps loosen us up to be able to breathe and helps kind of maneuver our horse's spine and massage them before we ride is a little bit of cat-cow as we ride. So if you're sitting in the saddle and you're just warming up and, you're sitting, however, you with the reins, hold the front of the saddle. And as you inhale, we stretch up nice and tall, open the chest. And as we exhale, we round the spine. And as we inhale, we open the chest. And as we exhale, we round the spine. We'll do a couple more. Inhale, lift through the chest. Exhale, round through the spine. This helps horses a lot be able to slowly kind of maneuver their spine. So a lot of times I see, especially in older horses that are a little bit quote unquote lazy, it's really just stuck energy, right? It's just like us. Like sometimes if, you know, we've got a bad back or we've got to like move out of it in order to be able to move forward and follow that rhythm. So being able to help them breathe, being able to help them move their spine is huge for helping them be able to move freely. That also, so that one is one of my favorites. The cat cows with matching our inhales and our exhales, I think is beautiful for any type of energy of horse. I think it helps horses that maybe are a little bit on the nervous side. And I also think it helps horses that are a little bit more on the, I don't really want to be here, I'm kind of bored side. Because everybody likes to feel good, right? We all want like a nice back massage is great. So as we're doing that, we are kind of maneuvering their spine as well, which is really nice. Let me think before I have us lie down if there's anything else I wanted to note. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat as we go. Just want to make sure that I'm not skipping anything. I think that's it for right now. I will give us the last two exercises at the very end so you have them fresh on the mind to try before you ride. But I'm like so rusty on Zoom. I've been teaching in person so much lately. I will send you guys the 2 breath work exercises in a follow-up email as well. I've just got short ones on YouTube, so that way you can, if you forget everything we spoke about, you'll have those and you'll have this recorded. But yeah, so we're gonna go ahead and lie down if you can on our bellies to really help us be able, the biggest problem I see, so I'm going to stay seated just for a little bit so you guys can hear me, so I'm not talking into the ground, but you can find yourself lying down comfortably on the belly. The biggest quote unquote challenge I see for my riders is learning how to reverse how they've been taught to breathe. So especially as women, that's what I can relate to. We are taught a lot to kind of hold ourselves together and bring our shoulders up and keep everything really together. So what it does is it constricts our breathing and it tends to create chest breathers because our diaphragm isn't free. So it's just a lot of being really easy and delicate with ourselves, but a lot of inviting that air down into the abdomen, which also helps with our mind, right? Our body communicates with our brain more than our brain communicates with our body, actually. So if our breath is in our chest, it's telling our brain that there's something to worry about. If our breath is in our belly, then it's telling our brain that everything's okay. And the exact same thing with the horse. When the horse is in a relaxed position, they're a lot less likely to spook because they're not looking for something to spook at. We are the exact same way. So what we're going to do is we're laying on our bellies, and I will give us a little bit of Shavasana afterwards, just because I think Shavasana is like the best thing in the entire world. But right now we're going to do what's called crocodile breathing. So as we're laying here, we're going to take our hands underneath our foreheads, if that feels comfortable, or we can take one ear to the mat. And a lot of breath work, you may feel like you want to yawn a lot after this, because sometimes when we take in too much CO2, we want to yawn to be able to like almost catch our breaths. So I'll help us kind of get rid of some of that at the end. But as we're lying here, I just want you to slowly bring awareness to your belly on an inhale, pushing into the mat. And on an exhale, letting go. That's it for now, with the head rested. And now as you're lying here, I want you to slowly see if you can start to wrap the breath all the way around and expand into the back rib cage. Good, and just very gently releasing that. And then rolling over onto your back. I'm going to remain seated just so you can hear me. And to release some of that CO2, like I said, sometimes breath work can actually, we breathe in too much. So we're going to take 2 quick exhales followed by a little inhale. So we're going to, well, first we're going to inhale through the nose. And then through the nose, you're going to exhale twice. So kind of like a kid after a tantrum. It's actually exactly what their body's doing. It's trying to release CO2. So you're going to inhale and then exhale twice. So it's hard for me to make it loud enough on Zoom. But just doing a couple more of those, inhaling through the nose and then 2 quick exhales to get all of that CO2 out. Good, and then gently just releasing that. And this is the breathing exercise I invite you to try next time you ride. Before you get on, just standing with your horse, just taking a moment. Maybe you're still on the cross ties, maybe you're at the mounting block, whatever it may be. I promise they will thank you for it. So clearing all the air out however you need to. Big exhale, followed by an inhale. Exhale, let it all go. And this is the counted breathing. So we're going to inhale for a count of 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold 1, 2. Exhale 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold 1, 2. Exhale 4, 3, 2, 1. Resuming on your own, picking a number that works for you. So if 4 is too low or too high, finding a number that works. Something that relaxes you. There's no need to stress about it. And then releasing the counting of the breath. Tucking the chin ever so slightly into the chest, allowing the body to relax. And resting in our final Shavasana for just a couple of minutes. Fully releasing, fully relaxing. Now very slowly, taking one hand to your heart, one hand to your belly, and repeating in the mind, I am enough. I have always been enough, and I will always be enough. I am enough. I have always been enough, and I will always be enough. I am going to send you the alternate breathing exercise in a video because I do think that some days too much breathing can make us a little dizzy and a little overwhelmed. I hope that that did not happen today. And if it did, I'm sorry. I hope that I didn't throw too much information, but please know that I love to hear from you. So if you want to send me a text or an email or follow me on Instagram at Gabby Diacon, please feel free to, and I would love to answer any questions. And I am available for virtual lessons as well. But just allowing yourself to really absorb this practice and lie there for as long as feels right for you. It is 3 minutes to 8. So if you did need to do something, just so you know. But just remembering that this is allowed to be fun. Remembering your intention. The light and love in me sees and honors the light and love in each and every one of you. Thank you so much for joining me. And please let me know how these exercises help with your riding or with your horse, or again, if you have any questions. I know I've said that a million times, but I really do love to hear from you. So I hope everybody has a wonderful night, and I hope to see you soon.